Good morning, people. So we're going to have a nice conversation. We're going to start in a few minutes, but before we start, we officially start the conference here. We may want to introduce to each other, so that we can talk a little bit while we wait for our friends who are coming, because I think we have one speaker the second speaker is not here yet.
Okay, this is great. Dr. Nyakoke, my name is Yao Noel. I'm a journalist, and I would like to apologize for last time. I was in a busy schedule with our Secretary General, who was traveling that day to Yaoundé. So I could not be with you, which I was really sorry about that. But today, I'm here and I'm really honored and satisfied to be for this great subject topic in which I believe.
Okay, thank you very much. But Yao Noel is the president. I don't know why you forgot to mention that. Noel, you may want to talk about your network.
Yes, but I don't think that one is necessary, since we are all committed to African integration.
Okay, thank you, no problem.
Unless you mention that our Union of Journalists for African Free Press is strongly committed to African integration and unity.
Okay, thank you very much, Noel. It's okay, that was clear. Okay, Tumani Sise. Tumani?
Yeah.
Yes, you may say your name and talk and mention your affiliation if you can in English. If not, somebody can translate for you.
Okay. My name is Tumani Sise. I'm journalist.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Alpha Abulai. Alpha. Okay, Alpha Abulai yes, Alpha.
Good morning.
Good morning. You see, you speak English, Alpha. Great job.
I try, but I cannot speak loud.
Okay. Where are you based, Alpha?
I'm a journalist from Conakry in Guinea, West Africa.
Thank you very much. That was clear.
Okay, thank you. I'm Guinean. I'm Guinean from Conakry, but je suis Guinéen de Conakry and je suis le président de l'association des éditeurs de la presse indépendante, la presse traditionnelle, la presse imprimée. Et donc, très content d'être avec vous. Hein. Merci, à tout à l'heure.
Thank you so much. Alpha Abulai Diallo, journalist, member of the UGPLA network of journalists for freedom of press in Africa, led by Yao Noel, who spoke, and then Tumani Sise is also a member of the same organization, and Tumani Sise is from Ivory Coast, Alpha from Guinea, Yao Noel from Ivory Coast. And now I am going to call on quickly, this is what we do, quick presentation as we waiting for the second speaker and some other friends who are going to join us. And Muiza Muntali, all the way from Malawi. Muiza.
Hi, how are you?
Yes.
How are you doing?
I'm fine. Introduce yourself, 30 seconds.
36, okay, I'm Muiza Muntali. I'm with Africa World Now Project, and I host the show Africa Now, as well as produce the show. I'm also executive producer of Africa World Now Project radio.
But right now you're in Malawi or you back to the US?
Sorry?
Well, you're still in Malawi or you're in the United States now?
No, I'm still in Malawi.
So, Malawi. Good, thank you. Yeah. We have a new friend who is going to introduce herself. We connected last week. A wonderful a brave and powerful sister from Ethiopia, born to Ajema Gondel.
Hello, everyone. Happy to meet you here. My name is Bontu Ajoma Gondel. I'm 23 years old who live in Addis, capital city of Ethiopia. Can I say anything?
That's it. Oh, you may talk about your organization.
I should talk about my organization.
Yes.
My organization named East Africa Initiative for Change, which works on peace building through dialogue, which works on youth and women empowerment, as well as leadership. The third and the last objective, but not least, the last objective is working on multilingual, as Ethiopia has like more than 80 languages, and as well as Africa. So we are working on multilingual structures. That's it.
Thank you very much. So
happy to be here too.
Thank you very much. We will have time, you know, when during the conference, some of our friends may be given the opportunity to introduce themselves. We were waiting for a few of our friends. It is 10:07. We want to have this conversation in 1 hour and 30 minutes. Last time, on last Saturday, we have a conference on Thomas Sankara. You know, it was a long conference. It was a big event. So, you know, and we need to do some translation in a very traditional way. So we went over 2 hours, but this time we will not do that. There will not be translation here. Those who can manage to get what is going to be said in English, we will appreciate that. So I'm glad to have you here. And I have already talked about Yao Noel. It's a great friend. He was one of my mentors when I was in Ivory Coast, when I was a young journalist. And then, so, you know, he's here today. He's a great man of Africa doing great things. And I'm glad to have him here. I have my wonderful colleague and friend, Dr. Fu, who is assistant professor of political science at Lincoln University. And then she supports me in most of the things that I do. Be in school where I'm always asking her questions about what to do about things in the school. So she's here, and I'm glad she's here today. Dr. Sia is here also, a friend of us, of mine, who was last time on the second panel on the Brics. And then, so this is our network. And then I will be talking about many of my friends who are members of the Convention for Pan-Africanism and Progress. I will not be able to mention all the names here. And but Ange David Baime, who is in Ivory Coast, also is the leading an NGO in the field of environment, is here. So friends, it's going to be a nice conversation today. And I just wanted to tell you what we've been doing for those who are discovering us today. We launched in 2007 a Pan-African Forum in Washington, D.C., when Pan-Africanism was not popular at that time. We called that movement the Revival of Pan-Africanism Forum. And then we organized a number of activities, conferences, and then workshops with many other people. And then several groups were going to join us in 2011, 2012. And then some of them are Friends of the Congo, represented by Maurice Carney, who is here, who is the director of the Friends of the Congo. He is going to be speaking in a few about Brics and then regional economic integration in Africa. And then we have my wonderful friend, Dr. Mjiba Freeworth, who is not here, member of the All African People Revolution Party, and then some other friends, the Socialist Worker Party, and then Party for Socialism and Liberation, and Pan-African Community Action, and then Muiza Africa Now, and then some other groups. And then we have been doing this since 2007. And then in 2012, we decided to launch a Thomas Sankara Annual Conference. And then since that time, we've been trying to do that every year. And last week, we organized that conference for this year. And then we were pleased to have several of our friends who've been part of the network who attended the conference. And then in 2017, we launched Cuba, Africa and the World, as we wanted to put emphasis on Cuba's contribution to world history and Cuba's contribution to the decolonization of Africa and Cuba's contribution to internationalism. And now in 2017, under the leadership of Horace Campbell, who is a professor at Syracuse University, there was the second Kwame Nkrumah Pan-African Kwame Nkrumah Intellectual and Cultural Pan-African Festival. And my friend, Dr. Mjiba, was a member of the organizing committee. And in 2018, under the leadership of Dr. Mjiba, there was the 60th anniversary of the All African People's Conference. That conference was organized in 1958 by Kwame Nkrumah when Ghana became independent, and the chief architect of that conference was George Padmore of Trinidad, who, by the way, distanced himself from communism to embrace Pan-Africanism, and who was also one of the organizers of the Manchester Congress of 1945. So Nkrumah, Prime Minister of Ghana, George Padmore, his advisor, they organized at that conference in 1958, and 300 people were there. Some of them were going to be the leaders of independent Africa. Patrice Lumumba from Congo, Frantz Fanon was going to represent the Algerian Liberation Front. Kenneth Kaunda was going to be there. Mugabe, and then Julius Nyerere they were there. Jomo Kenyatta could not be there because he was in prison. Then later on, in 1960, 17 African countries became independent. So we wanted to commemorate that conference in 2018, and this is when we decided that we were going to put together like an organization in order to coordinate the activities in the Pan-African world. So we launched the Convention for Pan-Africanism Forum in November 2020 with many other friends from Benin, from Chad, from Congo, from Ivory Coast, and from other African countries, and even here from the United States. In the line of our commitment to justice and freedom in the world, we launched with some other friends who are based in the Brics countries. We decided to launch the New Dawn Vision in order to talk about international politics, as the creation of the Brics was going to come and then shape international history and international politics. So this is what we're doing. And then as an Ivorian, we struggle for the liberation of Gbagbo, fought against the International Criminal Court. So these are the three pillars of our struggle: Ivory Coast, Pan-Africanism, and internationalism. So today, we are here to have the third conference of our new organization, the Brics. And then we are going to listen to Adryan Wallace, who is a very good friend. And then she's going to talk about Pan-African, the new platform that was created in the field of regional integration in Africa. And then Maurice Carney, who is the director of the Friends of the Congo. So having said that, I wanted to give you like a brief overview about our activities. And now we're going to start this conference. Adryan, we will start with you.
Okay. So I'll pretty much be focusing my comments on the impact of the Brics on regional economic integration, specifically on the African continent. And I'll make a couple of other just remarks in general about some of the Brics overall goals and the ways in which they've impacted growth and economic inclusion in other regions of the world. So I thought I'd just begin with a bit of background about the Brics. So of course they were established in 2009, and they held their first summit in June of 2009. We all know their members, and I just want to also echo that South Africa was added as a former member last. Initially, it was just the BRIC. And so when South Africa joined, that was extremely important, especially for Africa as a region.
Just one second, Adryan, just one second.
Yes, sure.
So those who are not talking, please mute yourself. And also, I would like to ask Abraham and some other ones who are living in the United States or in England who can speak English. Please, you may do the translation and type in the group chat for the Francophones, please. Thank you, Adryan.
Okay. Sorry. So as I was saying, the addition of South Africa became very important for the entire African region in terms of its membership with the BRICS and its ability to also try to negotiate in a broader context, right? So basically the two goals of the BRICS were to, and I apologize for my inability to speak French, so sorry about that. I'll try to learn between now and the next summit. But so the two primary goals of the BRICS organization are to create an alternative model for development, right? So pushing back against the IMF, the World Bank, the kind of Western neoliberal approaches, and then also most importantly, to increase South-South cooperation, right? So particularly for countries in the global South, wanting to integrate their economies more and increase the amount of export trade as well, right? Just so in terms of thinking about the kind of scope and the financial heft of the BRICS, in like 2019, their combined GDP was around 19.6 trillion US dollars. That constitutes about 23.2% of the gross world product. And that means that they constitute about 32% of global purchasing power parity, right? So this is an important organization, specifically because of the ways in which they generate a lot of revenue and could potentially reduce trade deficits. So a couple of key institutions within the BRICS that I want to make sure we highlight, and then I'll move right to the data analysis. But there's the New Development Bank. They've already allocated about $15 billion. So there are 53 projects across multiple regions in the global South. And as a result of COVID-19, they've actually instituted a project preparation fund. And that fund is designated specifically to try and help alleviate state budgets in response to COVID-19, right? So in addition to the development bank, they also have a parliamentary forum, and the efforts with that particular institution are to create, kind of bilateral relationships among BRICS members in their legislative branches specifically. So that's also an effort to harmonize their policy agendas. The next institutional features, the BRICS Business Council and Forum. And here they're really focusing on a list of things. I'll just highlight a few. So skills development, that's capacity building. So we're thinking about human capital, so education, training. There's a huge emphasis on energy development in the green economy, the digital economy, agribusiness, which is certainly important because many of the countries that are part of the BRICS, in addition to the regions, and especially when we think about the African continent and agriculture, those sectors employ significant percentages of the population, and it's also critical in terms of food security. Lastly, the Council and Business Forum also focus on deregulation, and that's important because it provides, in theory anyway, protectionist measures for nascent private sector firms, and specifically, of course, for BRICS members, but then also for countries that are potentially utilizing funds from their development firm. The contingent reserve arrangement is another feature that I just want to highlight because of its benefits for other economies outside of kind of the G20 countries. And the contingent reserve arrangement is really an effort to kind of act as a buffer between the local currencies of both BRICS members and then also other global South countries and fluctuations in global financial markets. Right. So in other words, the contingent reserve is there to prevent or to help try to mitigate anyway issues around hyperinflation or inflation. The last few I'll just run through quickly. You've got the Academic Forum and Think Tank Council, and that just focuses a lot on research and development, right? And the ways in which academic literature is supposed to be utilized and adopted across regions. There's the BRICS Women's Business Alliance. So here we see the BRICS taking a formal position on improving and increasing gender equality. There's a Young Scientist Forum, and then there's also a Youth Summit, right? So as an organization, they're institutionally thinking about issues of gender equality, right? Integrating women more into the global economy, and then also they're thinking about the multi-generational effects, particularly targeting youth around research and development and employment as well. So the last conference that was held right in 2021 in September, I believe on September 9th was the first day. The theme that year, or I should say this year, we're still in 2021, is inter-BRICS cooperation for continuity, consolidation, and consensus, right? And so they're thinking about political security, so trying to reform this kind of global multinational system, kind of pushing back against terrorism, quote unquote, especially the ways in which it's been framed in the West with a lot of Islamophobia, et cetera. In terms of their economic goals, they want to implement their partnership strategy for the next 5 years. They're thinking about agricultural research, cooperation around disaster and resilience. So these issues are critical when we think about climate change and the fact that most countries that have the least ability economically to absorb some of those costs, right, and who have not contributed very much to climate change either, there's a need for some kind of additional funding or revenue stream to relieve those domestic budgets. Lastly, they're thinking about innovation. So again, this focuses on research and development, entrepreneurship, et cetera. And then finally, digital health and traditional medicine. And of course, that's essential when we think about COVID. The cultural component is an interesting feature of the BRICS because it's an explicit effort to try and harmonize and increase positive relationships and interactions among people, so among citizens and people that are residing in BRICS countries with one another. So thinking about ways in which they have similar cultural issues, that they could partner on academic questions, right, sports, business, really this idea of integrating their other political and social institutions aside from just thinking about regional economic integration. Okay. So specifically, and I'm going to go into the data now, but I want us to keep in mind that even though we're looking at, and most of the BRICS reports focus on kind of aggregate numbers in terms of growth, trade deficits, right? The increases in the number of exports. We also want to be very mindful, especially thinking about this in a Pan-African context, that we also have to disaggregate that kind of macro level data, right? And really think about what that means on the ground for African people. And so we want to pay close attention to, and I'll be paying close attention to today, issues around gender equality, the Gini index, which measures economic inequality within countries, right? I'll be delving a bit deeper into the questions around trade deficits, and then the ways in which the BRICS, although it's got a lot of potential to change kind of normative development models, but I'll also be highlighting the ways in which it has improved the economic positions and the trade deficits for the founding members of the BRICS, but those same benefits haven't necessarily translated completely to Africa as a region, right? So we'll get a chance to unpack that, talk about it a bit more. So this first chart just highlights kind of and again, taking Brazil, China, India, Russia, and South Africa, and really summarizes their growth rates, right? And so we can see that there are some initial spikes in 2007, 2008. We see a little bit of a dip, then some plateauing. And then particularly for China and India, we kind of see that this trend continues to go upward, and with Russia and Brazil, and to a larger extent as well, South Africa, we're starting to see a bit of a dip in terms of the individual growth numbers, right? Some of that variance can also be explained when we think about the robustness of China's economy and the ways in which it's kind of positioned itself globally, right? It owns a significant portion of debt. It's really managed to kind of make manufacturing extremely efficient. And it's also engaged in a series of development projects. So China's kind of diversified their economy with 3 different funding streams. And Russia, in contrast, has had some difficulties, not only expanding its efforts in terms of trade, but also addressing some of the kind of weaknesses in its own private sector. This next slide highlights for us, and we can, slide A really looks at deficits in terms of natural resources and agriculture. And so this second slide, B, actually illustrates for us trends over time. And I really wanted to focus on the years 2014 through 2019, because when we start talking about the impact of the BRICS on regional economic integration, especially on the African continent, we at least have to start from the moment when they have institutionalized their development bank, right? It's not fair to start 7 years before the development bank was established, because then we're not really examining any key impacts in the data. And so we can see, if we drop down to the second slide, when we look at the African continent, that there's actually quite a mixed picture, right? So we have some areas, so the more blue an area is, you've got a very high decrease, and the areas where it's red or orange or yellow, right? Yellow means there's basically very little change, and then when we see areas that are red and orange, that means that there's a greater increase, right, in dependence on agricultural and agricultural goods and raw materials. And so I think it's important for us to understand that when we look at the second map over time, over this 4-year period, sorry, that there's really a complex picture that's happening on the continent. And we always have to be, cognizant of the fact that, different economies, depending on the country, have different sizes, right? Different scales, different industries, different issues around inequality, different issues in terms of labor force participation and the readiness of markets. And so all of that then would, of course, impact their ability to even leverage things like the Brics Development Bank, right? It would also impact the ability of individual countries then to bargain collectively, because when you have such variations in the economic scales, then countries that tend to have larger GDPs, that tend to have more diversified economic portfolios, tend to adopt policies that are beneficial to them domestically, but the regional integration piece starts. I also thought it would be helpful to actually have the empirical data that looks at the differences in trade flows by region with the Brics. And so realize there's quite a bit of data on this chart, but basically for each region, so Africa, the Americas, Asia, and Europe, you have data that highlights the number of imports from Brics countries or from the Brics, right? And then also exports, right? And so one of the challenges, again, when we're thinking about the role of the Brics with regional economic integration on the African continent, is that as a region, Brics tends to, at an aggregate level, Africa tends to be one of the regions that has the fewest number of exports to Brics countries, even though, and those exports aren't quite twice as much as the imports from Brics countries, but that trade deficit is also important to be mindful of. And so it's important in terms of collective bargaining with African countries in a regional level, that they're also negotiating with the Brics as a group, as opposed to doing things bilaterally. And so part of the reason that we see this kind of gap in the import-export deficit, right, or the trade deficit between Africa as a region and the Brics is largely because there are additional bilateral relationships between each member of the Brics countries and other African countries on the continent. And so those bilateral dynamics are then undermining the ability of Africa as a region to negotiate kind of collectively, right? When we look at Europe, of course, we can think about the European Union as a regional economic community that is able to negotiate pretty collectively, right? The same thing with Asia as a region. You've got ASEAN and other groups and organizations that are regional economic group cooperative communities, and they are also doing a lot of collective bargaining. In the Americas, we do have the Organization for American States, right, and other groups that are leveraging the collective bargaining in a different way. So it doesn't mean that the Brics don't have potential, certainly, to reduce trade deficits and generate sustainable and equitable growth on the continent of Africa. But it does mean that African governments have to prioritize the interests of all of their citizens, not just the groups that may be more affluent or more powerful politically. And it also means that regionally on the continent, there's a need for institutions that can prioritize this idea of collective bargaining, right? Otherwise, the potential that the Brics could generate can actually end up being a liability or just kind of a recreation, right, of the same economic relationship between African countries regionally and then global value chains more broadly. This slide, next two slides actually look at the specific GDP and trade openness scores for individual founding members of the BRICS countries and Africa as a region, right? So we can move right to, I just want to kind of draw some key distinctions here. So Russia will notice, and this is true not only of the African region, but also in Asia and the Americas and Europe as well. You know, Russia does not have the same level of robustness economically as certainly as China, and in some cases as India. So they tend to be lower in terms of trade openness in general. So that's not unique in that respect, but I want to pay close attention to the relationships with China and South Africa, specifically because of China's critical position in the global economy, and South Africa, because obviously it's the one country that's a founding member of the BRICS that is actually from the region. So at an aggregate level, when we look at China's overall trade openness score, China's trade openness score with Africa as a region compared to other regions in the world is actually the lowest, right? And what's important to note is that you do have a lot of exports coming out of Africa as a region to China, right? So there's a lot of exchange in terms of goods, but those are typically either natural resources, mineral wealth, right? Agricultural products. They're not manufactured goods. There's not an effort to increase, for example, access to financialization services or any of those other things that would move away from this kind of commodity-based market. And the import restrictions on a lot of goods and products that are coming from African countries in China to China, right, is certainly a limitation as well in terms of regional integration and the impact that the BRICS could have overall on generating more growth and also supporting and protecting private sector firms, right, or smaller businesses on the African continent in African countries, in addition to protecting labor, right, as well. South Africa, in terms of its trade openness score, has one of the higher trade openness scores, which isn't surprising, again, because it's part of the African Union, obviously. It's also part of a lot of regional, sub-regional, rather, economic cooperative organizations. So there's already a clear relationship between South Africa's economies of scale and the economies of scale of other countries on the African continent. So there's already some built-in integration there. So that's not surprising that they've got one of the highest trade openness scores, and that their joint GDP is also kind of ranked.
Adryan,
yeah.
Finish in how many minutes?
Okay. Yeah, I can just finish right now with the limitations. Yep.
Okay.
So I'm on my last slide.
I think you were showing that the other map. What you want to show that map you were showing with the colors?
Oh, yes. Okay, I can do that. It's just a map of the regional economic cooperative agreements on the continent.
Okay, yes, so people can see. Yeah, thanks.
Yes. And so you have, the reason I wanted to just include this map is because when we think about the BRICS and regional integration and economic integration in Africa, we also have to ensure that the BRICS has a negotiating relationship with one, right? Thinking about the African Union with the Continental Free Trade Agreement, but then also all of these other sub-regional economic communities that exist, right? So we don't want to kind of, even though these also have limitations in terms of enforcement, but at the same time, just completely ignoring them is also counterproductive. So there needs to be some effort to kind of harmonize these relationships. So I'll just end there, but that each member state has to focus on its own domestic inequalities, that we have to think about not just integrating African countries and African people into the global economy, but that we want to make sure that labor is protected and that people have control over their own means of production, right? And so regional economic integration should be a way to ensure that African countries working with the BRICS is done in a way that's equal, equitable, and that resources are redistributed to the masses and not just the elite. So I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you very much, Adryan, and for your wonderful presentation. Maurice Carney, go ahead.
Okay, thank you again, Nyaka, and the organizers for having me on this morning to share probably more from a grassroots perspective rather than a scholarly perspective. Even though we do have critiques of the whole notion of Brics and African regional integration. To give the people who are on a sense of who we are, Friends of the Congo is a solidarity institution. And with really two overarching aims. One is to raise global consciousness about what's transpiring in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And the second is to provide support to local institutions that are engaged in a Pan-African struggle. Now, we come in the tradition of Friends of Abyssinia, initiated by revolutionaries and Pan-Africanists from the 1930s, when they came to the assistance or to the side in solidarity of the Ethiopians who are under attack by the Italians. The same notion, we maintain that Congo has been under attack for the last quarter century by its neighboring countries backed by an imperial power, and have suffered from a war of aggression, starting in 1996 with the invasion of the Congo by Rwanda and Uganda, and again in 1998. So that's our organizational mandate. When Nyaka asked me to intervene on the question of Brics and African regional integration, I was trying to figure, well, what does Brics have to do with African regional integration? I'm not sure that it's the optimum instrument for looking at, I guess you can say, South-South relations and where Africa fits in, both in terms of the individual countries and in terms of regional blocs. The notion of, I share many of the critiques, let's say, that we've seen books written about on Brics. Probably most noteworthy is the collection put together by Patrick Bond, the Brics, an anti-capitalist critique. Share a lot of the critiques that are found among the authors in that collection of essays. Reason being, if you look at the Brics, and especially today, and you pull out India, for example, led by Prime Minister Modi, and you pull out Brazil, led by Bolsonaro, and you look at the nature of those states and their relationships with the working class in those countries, and even the most objective observer would have to agree that they represent repressive policies, they represent corporate interests at the expense of the working class. And if, in fact, you're in agreement with that sentiment, you'd have to ask, then what do they have to offer to the global South? What do they have to offer to Africa if their domestic policies are fully ensconced in the capitalist camp? And even with the establishment of BRICS, in their initial declarations, it seemed, it appeared that their aim was to get or at least one of the aims anyways, was to get a better seat in the house, so to speak, in the big house, the multilateral institutions, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, as opposed to overturning it or providing an alternative. Although lauded by Fidel Castro coming out of the Brazil summit in 2014 at Fortaleza, that BRICS offered an alternative, one would have to question that, whether or not that whole framework, the notion of BRICS, offer an alternative. And in this brief presentation, I'd like to extract two cases in order to demonstrate why you would have to question whether or not BRICS is offering any kind of fundamental alternative to the existing capitalist order. And I would like to use Congo as a model and the engagement of two BRICS members in the Democratic Republic of Congo, China and South Africa. Now, we've seen China maybe at the time, 2000, from 2006 to 2010, probably the biggest investment on the African continent was infrastructure for mineral swap that it proposed, a $10 billion deal. And at the time, Congo was just coming out of the conflict led by Joseph Kabila, and they were highly indebted. In fact, they were a hippie country, highly indebted country. And they were indebted, of course, to the World Bank, the IMF, the Paris Club, the London Club. So all of those institutions, those multilateral institutions, challenge the deal that China had put on the table with the Democratic Republic of the Congo, because they claim that Congo was already indebted and it would be taking on more debt. And in fact, what unfolded as a result of the challenge was a row between China and the West, and especially as it relates to the multilateral institutions. In the Financial Times, China had accused the West of the Western countries and the lending arms of blackmail in the Congo, because they had maintained that the $11 billion debt that Congo had to them would not be forgiven if they entered into this deal with China. In addition to that, Congo was in line to receive some $600 million in loans or grants from the IMF. So it turned out to be a battle, not so much between Congo and the West, but between China and the West. And ultimately, Congo had to concede and renegotiate the deal with China, and to where it was reduced from $10 billion to $6 billion. Congo was able to get the operating funds that it needed, the $600 million. But we see that in China being engaged in the Congo, and the way it has been, runs interference with the West, at least on one level, particularly as it relates to the multilateral institutions. However, as it relates to the corporate interests, it's not so much of a confrontational relationship, in the sense that the structure in which the Congo is, or how it was established and how it was formed, much like the rest of the African continent, it was formed as an outpost for the extraction of natural resources. And that structure, that capitalist structure, remains in place to this very day. And we don't see China challenging that. What we do see China doing is maybe offering some better terms around the edges in terms of loans, maybe bringing more development for Congo's minerals. They're doing roads and hospitals and all, but they're not looking to set up Congo so that Congo can process the cobalt that it's producing. China processes 64% of the world's cobalt. Meanwhile, Congo has 60 to 70% of the world's reserves of cobalt and produces the largest percentage of cobalt in the world, but it doesn't process anything. So that neo-colonial model that Nkrumah talks about, where the resources are extracted out and returned to Africa as finished goods, is still very much in place and intact. In fact, one of the largest mines in the Congo, called the Tenke Fungurume mine, was owned by the Americans, by a company called Freeport-McMoRan out of Arizona. And that company sold the mine and it sold it to the Chinese. So we see the Chinese being fully engaged with American corporate power. And China is one of the main sources for the import of cobalt to the United States, according to the United States Geological Survey. So if the state of China is that engaged with the Congo and that aligned with US corporate interests in the Congo, in spite of the roles that take place diplomatically between diplomats, recently the Chinese ambassador and special envoy to Africa from the United States were going back and forth with each other about the Congolese government's aim to renegotiate the Chinese mining deals. So the point is that is the structure that's in place. China is not challenging that capitalist structure. It's not challenging the extractive process. It's not challenging the lack of vertically integrated economies in the Congo or on the African continent. And that makes one, the logical extension of that is, if it's not as a state, and the state interests certainly prioritize the global cooperative interest on the Brics, if it's the state is not showing any, not demonstrating any intention to change the system, to restructure the system, then how is it that that Brics is going to do it if China doesn't do it as a state itself? Just quickly on South Africa. South Africa is engaged in the Congo in so many ways. And whether we're talking about militarily through the UN and Rapid Deployment Brigade that was sent there in 2012, 2013 to confront militia groups in the Congo, whether you're talking about energy deals, Congo provides a substantial part of electricity to Eskom from the Inga Dam that's transmitted through to South Africa. However, I'd like to look at one particular case in terms of, or sector area in terms of South Africa's corporate interests in the Congo. They've long had corporate interests in the Congo, whether we're talking about Anglo Gold Ashanti, who has mining concessions, gold mining concession in the Congo worth billions of dollars, or even if we look at the current president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, who was a board member of a company called Xstrata. And Xstrata was in partnership with Glencore. And many of you are familiar with Glencore as a major, one of the largest, if not the largest mining company in the world, headed up by, formerly headed up by South African Ivan Glassenberg. So here we see Glencore, who is involved in the Congo in a very exploitative way on several levels, whether it was through corrupt deals with the Israeli billionaire Dan Gertler, who's been sanctioned by the US Treasury Department, or polluting waterways in the Congo, you name it. But with Ramaphosa, it's no longer on the board. He had to resign the board of Extractor, of course, but remained a major shareholder of the company that was engaged in the Congo in extracting minerals, exploiting local labor, child labor for the benefit of corporate interests. And we see that as a model in terms of South African corporate engagement in the Congo, where the corporations benefit from the relationship, and the Congolese elite, some in the state or in the government, but the people suffer tremendously and do not benefit at all from any of the deals or the minerals that are right under their feet that they sometimes dig up with their bare hands. So the central thrust of critique or presentation is that one, if you look at the individuals, nations, I just took two as an example, and their engagement with Congo as a representative of the continent as a whole, and a lot that happens in the Congo is emblematic of what unfolds on the African continent as a whole, then I don't see the usefulness of Brics in bringing about any kind of fundamental or sustainable change that would benefit either Congo or Africa as a whole. In fact, in looking at probably a more useful instrument is to look at continue to look at those individual members of BRIC, BRICS, particularly Russia, China, and India. And if you've looked over the last decade or so, or 5 to 10 years, what you see the more powerful instrument of analysis is to look at the so-called African conferences, whether we're talking about the Russia-Africa summit that took place in Sochi a couple of years ago, the India-Africa summit that took place last, I believe in 2019, 2020 was canceled. Look at FOCAC, that we're on the verge of the next FOCAC, the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Those are more useful instruments for looking at regional integration on the African continent and the relationship between Africa and these individual states. And one thing that looms large, in spite of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement that's been initiated, is that Africa needs to get its house in order in terms of being coordinated, functioning as a unit, as Nkrumah and Touré and others had envisioned, because you have a situation where African nations are going to these summits as individual nations, not as Africa, not as a continent as a whole. And there's just no comparison when you have, Gabon or Rwanda going and engaging China, like, on what level? So the big challenge is the integration of the continent as a whole. And when you talk about the integration of the continent as a whole, Congo looms large, front and center. And we haven't seen the engagement from Congo that one would expect, considering Congo's size. It's the second largest country on the African continent, fourth in population. Considering Congo's wealth, arguably not only the richest country on the continent, but in the planet, if we believe the Business Insider's economists who say that there's an estimated $24 trillion worth of natural wealth in the Congo. So we don't see the type of engagement from the Congo as a regional power, a continental power. It's a country that, unlike any other country on the African continent, has 9 African countries bordering it. So you know what happens in the Congo immediately affects those 9 neighbors. But again, we just don't see the initiative coming out of the leadership of the Congo that would put it squarely in the Pan-African tradition that we saw from Kwame Nkrumah and Modibo Keita and Touré, where they in the initial phases of the United States of Africa in developing the idea and the principles, and as Nkrumah laid out in his book, and The Challenge of the Congo, they saw Congo would serve as the capital of the United States of Africa in driving the Pan-African vision that Nkrumah had laid out. So just to wrap up, in this brief presentation, one, the notion of Brics being something that an entity that offers any kind of hope or aspiration or tangible possibilities for Africa is highly dubious. In fact, a more concrete, genuine model would be to look at what Hugo Chavez did in USARAL in establishing throughout Latin America, where he was able to extricate individual countries from the clutches of the IMF and World Bank, as he did with Argentina in providing loans that retired Argentina's debt to multilateral institutions. The loans that he provided to countries like Jamaica and Haiti, low interest loans that would enable them to get access to cheap for energy for pennies on the dollar. So if we saw models like that coming out of Brics, like what Chavez initiated throughout Latin America, then I would say we could have a genuine discussion about Brics and its relationship to Africa and regional integration. But I'm not optimistic that that's what's going to happen. And as I shared with my presentation, you just look at the individual countries and their engagement with Africa. I chose Congo as an example. Then you'd have very, very little hope for anything viable coming from Brics and as it relates to African regional integration. So I'll leave it there. I'll go to questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Maurice Carney and Adryan. Thank you so much, friends. Governor, you want to do like a quick translation? I suggested that somebody does the translation in the group chat. So if there is anything, yeah, Governor, you can put that in a group chat for the Francophones.
Yeah. I can definitely do that.
Okay, so in the group, like group chat for the Francophones. So we continue the conversation. And Priscille, you may also help Governor. So anything that our friend just said, write that in the group chat in French for the Francophones, so that we can have like a more interactive exchange here. Now, I saw Yao Noel. I was wanted to ask a question to Adryan. Noel, if you are there, you can, I don't know if you wrote, you want me to read your question or you want to, to ask your question yourself. The first question I remember, is China a colonial, like a new colonial or new imperial power in Africa? I think that I've seen that question. So Maurice and Adryan, let's do that quickly so that, we can have, we can answer as many questions as we can.
Is that, you want me to go?
Yes.
Is China a new imperial power in Africa?
Yes, like a new colonial
that was the question?
Yes.
I mean, in order for you to say that China is a new imperial power, you'd have to erase a lot of history, to arrive at that conclusion. First of all, nations, right, and states what they do is they act in their interests, right? And China is pursuing its interests on the African continent, and it's using its economic heft in order to pursue its interests. Now, for Africans to pursue their interests and defend their interests, Africans cannot do it as individual states. It's just like there's no win situation there. So the onus is on Africans to organize as a bloc, and we cannot overstate how critical it is to return to Nkrumah, return to Toure, return to Keita, return to Lumumba, and envision the United States of Africa. And that's the best way for Africa to protect its interests, is to organize as a unified bloc. Now, we've seen on the continent how this debate has unfolded, unfortunately, and it appears that the go it slow camp, has won out in this pursuit. I think we all recall at the founding of the African Union, the debates that took place where you had the conservative bloc represented by folks like Thabo Mbeki of South Africa, Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, where they said that we wanted to move slow, regional integration, right? Southern African Development Community, East African Community, ECOWAS, and solidify those regional bases before we get to a unified continent. Then we saw Libya, led by Gaddafi at the time, was pushing for Pan-Africanism now, unify as a continent now. And not only pushing for it with his words, but he was the largest donor to the African Union. He was putting money behind his words in terms of the pursuit of a unified continent. So that's the first thing, that China is pursuing its interests on the African continent, and Africa has to organize to protect, as a continent, has to organize to protect its interests. Now, we cannot compare China to the US or to Europe, right? In terms of their engagements on the continent. I often share with folks that when this question arises, I said, Xi Jinping is not Otto von Bismarck, right? If you want to talk about the modern form of the African continent today, that comes out of the Berlin conference, where violence was used, assassinations, where coups, you just name it. Whether we're talking about France Afrique, right? The people in French speaking Africa, they can show you an imperial power and how an imperial power acts. You can compare China's engagement in Africa to France's engagement in Africa, right? In terms of overthrowing governments, in terms of controlling monetary system, in terms of controlling key infrastructures, where we're talking about transportation, telecommunications, you name it. Basically, a neo-colonial project. So China is coming in at a different level. Now, don't get me wrong. There was an interview with a Chinese businessman who was in Sudan, and they were asking him a question. He's like, "Why are you in Africa?" And he said, "I'm here to make money." So that's why he's there. He's there to make money. So the capitalist interests on the part of China, you cannot, ignore. But I wouldn't describe it, at least not at this stage, as an imperial power. I know China recently established its first base on the African continent in Djibouti, ostensibly to protect its trade interests, its water route interests. But you have the French is in Djibouti, the Russians are in Djibouti. I mean, the renting out of bases is Djibouti's #1 economic activity, right? Because of its strategic location. But again, it would be an exaggeration to look at China as an imperial power at this stage anyways. I'm not saying that it may not come to that, but I wouldn't put the Belt and Road Initiative under the category of imperialism.
Thank you very much, Maurice. Adryan, you want to answer the same question?
Yes, just very briefly. I think that when we look at China's bilateral relationships on the continent and then its role in the Brics, again, their goal is resource extraction, right? And so if your government is representing the interests of all of its entire population, then you do have the opportunity to negotiate with them. You can have them build physical infrastructure. You can start to stipulate terms in terms of how many local folks from your country are actually occupying managerial positions. Like, there is room to negotiate. However, the bigger challenge is that many governments are only representing the interests of their immediate constituents and of the elite. And so that's fundamentally the problem. So it won't matter if it's China coming and trying to negotiate. It won't matter if it's the Brics. It won't matter if it's the European Union. It won't matter who comes. If the states don't represent the interests of the aggregate population, then you're going to have exploitation. If you don't transform the means of production and labor and protect it, you're going to have the same sets of issues. So I think that if we're really going to prioritize regional economic integration, then that means that things like the Continental Free Trade Agreement and the role of the regional economic communities on the continent can't just push neoliberalism. They actually have to transform economic structures. And until and unless that happens, then it'll be Brics this week that's not being leveraged effectively. It'll be China next week that continues not to be leveraged effectively. And that's why it's so important to understand the material conditions on the continent for each African country, because they're not ubiquitous, they're not the same. And so you have some governments that do a much better job of negotiating and protecting those collective interests than others. But unless there is an agreed upon and enforceable mechanism for collective bargaining, then you're not going to see a fundamental shift. African countries will maintain the same position in global value chains, and it's going to be fundamentally disruptive and exploitative, right? It's something that we have to resist and challenge. Oh, Nyaka, sorry, I did want to mention that Baruti Katembo also posted a question.
Yes, so we can, like, just one second, we get back to Baruti,
okay.
Because Noel was the first. Remember, after
yes.
you were not even done, Noel wanted to ask a question.
Yes, yes, that's very true. Yes, sorry, go ahead.
So, Noel, are you there? Noel is not responding. So, Alphonse.
Thank you, Dr. Nyaka. My comment and also is like a solution. We do know, like the presenter said, we do know that.
Dr. Nyaka, I was here.
But we could not hear you. So Alphonse is talking now. So I will ask, when he's done, I'll come back to you.
Okay, great.
Okay, yes, Alphonse.
So we do know that we cannot expect from our leaders, to negotiate in the interest of African people, the best deal, the best trade deal with the Brics or European or American. So it's possible as a civil society, as a non-government organization, as a Pan-African movement, to come up together and to put up a trade deal in the interest of African people. And then when we have that trade deal, to push the African Union, to push our different states to adopt that as a trade deal for the whole African continent, because African resources belong to African people. So if you do have leaders that don't want to, negotiate in the best interest of African people, why African civil society, Pan-African movement cannot come up with that deal, and then to push our government to adopt that. If they do not, it becomes a struggle for us to make sure everybody that comes to Africa to trade or to mine or anything have to go with that guideline, with that that new trade that the Pan-African movement put up on the table. That's my question.
Okay, Noel?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the issue is the question of democracy and a strong civil society. Because if you don't have a strong civil society, how can government be obliged to negotiate in the interests of the majority of the people? So I think the basic issue is the question of a strong civil society based on democracy, accountability of those who rule the countries. And I think this is the issue, or is the great part of the issue, if we want to deal definitely with good governance in the unique and the whole interest of the masses of the people. This is my opinion.
Okay, thank you very much, Maurice. I see Baruti have some long questions here. For Maurice Carney, I have a question for Ndugu Maurice Carney. How can Africa Free Trade Agreement be optimized and put into solid operate to maximize intra-Africa economic engagement? In parentheses, trade, tourism, sharing resources. Okay, I think there is another question. What will it take to launch the sentiments of my aforementioned inquiries/question, given your thoughts that Brics, though representing economics, does nothing to boost trans-Africa economic engagement? That is for Maurice. And then that's the question asked by Baruti. Let me see the question that was asked to Adryan. The BRICS acronym only includes one continental African country, South Africa. Given this, do you see BRICS as a near future forerunner for countries like Britain, France, or Portugal to develop economic consortiums with selected African countries, while the Africa Free Trade Agreement simultaneously operates and grows in development? Example, Britain links with Angola, Nigeria, and Zambia as an economic community. The BNZ, what are your thoughts? If possible, please address my inquiry or part of the audience dialogue for this Zoom program. Asante Sana, thanks, many thanks. So we're going to take those two questions on the Africa Free Trade Agreement. The two questions are asked by Baruti, the comment and question of Alphonse, and then the question of Maurice Carney about civil society. Maurice, start with you.
Oh, so, yes, I'm not so optimistic about civil society and civil society bringing about the type of change that's being discussed, especially as it relates to trade deals. Really, from the grassroots perspective, is that the working class, the oppressed masses, have to organize to acquire power. That is through the state. One of the fundamental differences between Pan-Africanists of today and Pan-Africanists of yesterday, the Pan-Africanists of yesterday had control of the state, right? So when, if we look at Nkrumah and Touré, for example, when France, just ran roughshod over Sékou Touré because of his stance against, the French neo-colonial network. It was Nkrumah who was able to leverage the resources of the state to assist Touré when France just took everything out of the country and pretty much left the country destitute. So the biggest challenge for today is for the grassroots, for so-called civil society, is to organize to acquire power. Not all, you can organize to put pressure on power, of course. We saw what happened in Guinea when, actually we can look at Guinea, we can look at Senegal, when individuals come out of the opposition and they get in power, they I don't know what it is, they develop amnesia and act in the interests of the local elite and foreign capital.
Yeah, Maurice, it's exactly what I was saying. The civil society has to acquire strength and power.
Yeah, but the power that you're talking about is not solely to put pressure on the state, but to acquire control of the state. Because if you look at the African Union is made up of states, and one could hardly say that those the leaders in those states represent the interests of the people. One could hardly say that, right? If they represent the interests of the people, they're doing a pretty shoddy job of it. So the challenge is to get Pan-Africanists in power, Pan-Africanists that are accountable to the working class, to the oppressed masses. Now we hear, and Nyaka could probably chime in on it. It seems like some of the folks in Ghana are celebrating, Gbagbo's recent speech, where he channeled Kwame Nkrumah and saying, Nkrumah was right. It's the Nkrumah vision that we need to save Africa today. After he's been in power for I don't know how many years, and now he seems to have caught religion. So
be gentle on it.
Okay, I'll be gentle then. If the trade deals that Adryan is talking about in the negotiations, there's a technical aspect to it, right? Where you have to have the necessary expertise. Like for example, if you look at the Congo, the deal it negotiated with China, it wasn't done by a Congolese. It was done by a Canadian by the name of Paul Fortin, who used to work for a Canadian mining company, right? The mining laws in the Congo were written by the World Bank, right? So you have, even if you look at Guinea, you look at Rwanda, these countries, they have advisors like Tony Blair. Like Tony Blair is like an economic advisor to the Rwandan government, to the Guinean government, and telling them how to deal with their natural resources with the West, serving as bridge characters. So there just needs to be like a upswell from down below, right? And we see signs of it happening in different parts of the continent. But the ultimate, but where we see signs of it breaking down, I forget the brother's name who was talking. If we see signs of it breaking down, like we see the uprising in Burkina Faso, we saw the uprisings in Senegal, is when you get to the level of like, well, what do you do next? If you drive somebody out of power, there isn't yet a path where that mass energy and the mass interests can carry to the point of capturing the state and then acting and then the leaders are in acting and functioning of the state. What you're talking about in terms of civil society, that role of civil society would be more relevant, right? If the civil society had a credible partner in power that's acting in its interest, then you can hold them accountable. Then you can put deals on the table or recommendations on the table for them to enact. And I don't think,
Maurice,
I don't know.
Just a short comment on what happened recently in Guinea, where Alpha Condé, who is a French puppet, was ousted.
Right. Oh, you was asking me to make a short comment on it?
Comment, yes. Yeah, short comment, yes, on your part.
Oh, I mean, there's so much.
Maurice, on this 1 minute.
Okay, I'll be just really brief. A few quick things. You said a French puppet was ousted. I don't know. The coup leader who was replaced him, was part of the French Legionnaire. The thing about it is that imperial powers, and we have to be really careful, they have their hands both on those in power and the opposition. The choices that we're being given these days usually have the strings of the imperial powers attached. The coup in Guinea was certainly popular. If you look at the people supported the coup in Guinea because they wanted to get rid, of Condé. Condé had jailed political prisoners, suppressed opposition, killed people, had the military fire on civilians leading up to the elections. So he was despised so they're like anybody but him. So they cheered on the coup. So it was supported by the people without a doubt. But let's see how things unfold going forward. Of course, we know ECOWAS lacks any credibility whatsoever in the Guinea situation because you have figures like Ouattara out of Cote d'Ivoire, who did the same thing that that Condé did in Guinea, extending his term, and then ECOWAS co-signed it. They didn't come out in any strong way against Ouattara or against Condé. So the coup was a popular coup, but let's see what unfolds going forward. But one of the first things they said was that the corporate interests were going to be protected. That means the economic interests that are in place. Guinea is known for its bauxite and its iron. And not to be disparaging to Guinea, they call Guinea Little Congo because of the tremendous wealth that exists in that country. But we're talking about a country that's rich in Pan-Africanism, where the people, this is the Guinea of Sékou Touré, where these are the people that said no to the French. So the masses desire a genuine leader that's going to represent their interests. And when they saw Condé being removed, they were delighted, and I think that's what I would share about Guinea, just within the 1 minute.
Okay. Oh yeah, no, that was what, 1 long minute, right? Thank you. Adryan is laughing. Adryan, go. Adryan, do you want to respond to?
Okay, sure, and I will stick to 60 seconds. So
okay.
I think that
no, you can have 2 because
120 seconds. Okay,
no,
I don't know.
2 minutes, yeah. 2 minutes, no, 2 minutes.
Riches, okay. So I think Bardusi's comment is really important, and the question is really important, because ideally that's what the Continental Free Trade Agreement was supposed to do, right? Prevent the colonial economic relationships from continuing, like with Britain, with France, etc. And so it would not allow countries like Angola and Nigeria and Zambia to have some separate trade agreement with the UK, right? Because then that would undermine whatever efforts toward regional integration the Continental Free Trade Agreement was supposed to put in place. But again, I think the broader challenge is to make sure that there's resistance on multiple levels. So not only, I think civil society does have a role to play, at the same time, we can think about unions as well, right? And you can also think about civil society organizations and unions fielding political candidates, right? Because part of the problem, I think, is that we tend to think in silos in terms of trying to push for autonomy and some sense of sovereignty. And so it's like, okay, either the state or civil society, and the two can't mix. Well, neoliberalism and neocolonialism is very integrated. It's very holistic. So it takes the state, it will take civil society, it'll take discursive rhetoric around labor. It's really kind of all encompassing. And so our efforts toward resistance need to be just as comprehensive as well. So you have to put, if you're going to argue that the state is important, then that also means that you need to have leverage outside of the state and internally within the state, right? Because some of those institutions actually just need to be transformed. And putting another person in power isn't necessarily going to address that that kind of level of structural inequality. But some effort toward collective bargaining, which is what every other region in the world that has successes in terms of growth and addressing inequality does, is going to have to happen on the continent. And whether that means, the CFTA gets completely gutted, that's fine, because it's not really structurally different than most neoliberal models. But the idea that it exists does potentially create the option of other grassroots organizations actually coming in and redefining it, reorganizing it, and then implementing it in a way that's actually comprehensive and that represents everyone's interests. So I'll stop there. I think my 120 seconds is up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Adryan. So is there any other call? Yeah, I see Ange David. So now this is going to be the last round of questions. And so make your questions and comments brief, and then so that we can wrap up and then stick to the 1 hour and 30 minutes, because Maurice Carney has an engagement. Is like there is a program. Maurice, we talk when you answer. You may talk about the program in a few. So let's.
Dr. Nyaka, I must go to church.
Okay, you going now?
No. When we finish.
Okay, thank you very much. So he has to go to church, right? Jesus is waiting for him. So yes. So Ange David.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to thank all the presenters. One of my what Maurice Carney already responded concerning the role of civil society, because myself also I'm a bit not so happy or not so enthusiastic with civil society, because I'm working for now 20 years for civil society. I think we are not the most legitimate in that sense to have that change. Of course, we can contribute, we can try to educate people, we can try to do alliance, to do lobby, but we have to be very cautious about the fact that we are not the one detaining the power to that things. Maybe the only question I can also address to Maurice Carney is on Belt and Road Initiative. Do you think that this project, how it is designed in Africa, will help and facilitate the African development? Because for me, it is look like more extractive project. How can you maybe, or what do you think on that? Thank you.
Okay, so if there is any other question, we will take it, and then we're going to finish this session. Okay, so anyway, I don't see any questions. So Maurice Carney, please go ahead.
It's important when you talk about China and Africa, you have to also talk about the U.S. and Africa, because the U.S. has declared that they see Africa as a space. This is under the Trump administration with National Security Advisor, former National Security Advisor Josh Bolton, stated that Africa is a space for great power competition. So if we look, for example, in West Africa, Niger and Chad, where we see the United States recently in Niger establish $100 million drone base in Niger. At the same time, we see the Chinese is establishing a pipeline to transmit or transport oil through from Chad to Niger right to the coast. So here it is, you have the two powers in their juxtaposition. Now, I'm not saying that China isn't engaged in an extractive process throughout the continent, but when compared to the US, who's bringing militarization, drones, wars against, fights against terrorism, there really is no comparison in terms of savvy African leaders leveraging what China has to offer and utilizing that in order to propel the particular country forward or the continent as a whole. So at this, recall the primary concern around the Belt and Road Initiative is the indebtedness, whether or not Africans are going to be indebted to China, and then China is going to leverage that indebtedness for its interests. And China has done that to some extent, right? Africa Confidential recently published a piece on, how can I say, aggressive Chinese diplomacy, where China is calling on different African leaders, one, to support them as it relates to Taiwan and China's claims around Taiwan, two, to support them in votes at the UN. So we see like a diplomatic push, right, which is China acting in its interest. Will that Rubicon be broken? In the future, where they get to be involved in choosing leaders or overthrowing leaders on African continent, we don't know. But as it stands today, it seems like the Belt and Road Initiative is not, outside of the questions of indebtedness, is not harming the continent as a whole. But ultimately, right, it's not the Chinese or the Americans, the Russians, the Indians that's going to develop Africa. It's going to be the Africans. So we have to, as Africans, have to organize, Africans at home and Africans abroad, organize for the development of the continent, so the continent could be in a position to protect its interests.
Okay, thank you, Maurice Carney. Adryan, and the last comments, and then Maurice Carney will announce your event in a few. Adryan?
Okay,
so
great. Yeah.
Concluding remarks.
Yes, concluding remarks are just thank you so much, Nyaka, for putting this panel together and the conference and the symposium. And I definitely will be tuning in to the next one, because I think these kinds of intellectual exercises are really important for us, because it gives us some tangible steps to move forward, right? Some actual alternatives that we can think through. Again, I just want to emphasize that having control over resources and addressing the negotiating power imbalances is going to be essential for any efforts toward regional integration. So thank you.
That's beautiful.
Thank
Maurice,
Thank you, Adryan. Thank you, Maurice.
Maurice.
Thank you, Dr. Nyaka.
Thank you, Noel. Yes, Maurice.
Just thank you so much, Nyaka, for providing us with a platform to share, however briefly. As you can tell, we come from a position of organizing. That's what we do. And of course, our organizing is informed by scholarship as well. And we also draw on the tradition of Pan-Africanists. And our organization today is honoring the daughter of one of Africa's great.
Maurice, before you talk about that, I'm sorry. So somebody just posted a question: shouldn't Africa be concerned about terrorism? So as you talk about that in a conclusive remark, then you talk about Juliana.
Oh, absolutely. Africa should be concerned about terrorism, but if you just any objective observer would look at terrorism on the continent, and it seems like the more that the United States has engaged the continent, right, the greater the terrorism. You know, the U.S. military presence has increased 2,000%, and we see an increase in terrorism on the African continent. If we look at the Sahel, for example, why is there terrorism in the Sahel? What did Gaddafi say? Gaddafi said they're arming, you know, you get rid of me, you're going to be arming the terrorists. And now we see the Sahel is awash with weapons that are in the hands of terrorists. Why? Because NATO and Africana bombed Libya and overthrew the Gaddafi regime. And that did more to accelerate terrorism in the Sahel than anything else. If you're talking about terrorism, one thing that surely isn't the answer, and that is bringing in U.S. troops and increased U.S. militarization. That's not the answer to resolving terrorism. So that's the point I was trying to make.
Thank you. So talk about Juliana now.
Oh yes, as I was saying that we're organizers and draw upon the tradition of Pan-Africanism in thought and in action. And today, we're taking the opportunity to honor the daughter of one of Africa's greatest Pan-Africanists, Patrice Lumumba, and we encourage you to join us today as we do that. Just in the next half hour or so, I'll be going on. We'll be launching the program, and I'll put a link in the chat so that people can register and encourage you to join us and carry on the Pan-African tradition. We often celebrate Pan-Africanism, but the children of the Pan-Africanists who are still doing the work, we don't usually provide them with a recognition that they deserve. So we encourage you to join us today. I just sent the link in as a part of Congo Week to celebrate Juliana Lumumba, the daughter of Patrice Emery Lumumba, and continue the Pan-African tradition of calling for a United States of Africa as articulated by Kwame Nkrumah.
Okay, so thank you very much. We're going to end this session in the next 4 or 5 minutes. So I just wanted to thank all of you. I'm glad I saw some new people who came here to attend this conference. This is what we've been doing, and this is our calling, and this is our cause. So we were born for that. And then, as I told you in the beginning of this presentation, where we launched a platform in 2007, people thought that we were crazy, we were wasting our time. And then just 5 years later, our friends on the continent organized, and then we've been witnessing and seeing a series of subsequent people's power movements in different parts of Africa. And now Pan-Africanism is back. And like Maurice Carney was saying, Gbagbo, who was the president of Ivory Coast after 10 years in the International Criminal Court, and then he was freed thanks to the resilience of the Ivorians, and particularly thanks to the popular support and mobilization of the African people and some internationalists. And drawing lessons from that experience, Laurent Gbagbo just launched in Ivory Coast, which is traditionally known as a country that opposed Pan-Africanism, but the people's, the party of the African people in French, African people. And then So this is a big shift in the history of Pan-Africanism. That is a big shift because of Gbagbo, what he represents. He survived the French neocolonialism, came from the ICC prison. Now all the media in the age of the social media talking about Kwame Nkrumah, talking about Pan-Africanism. This is a favorable historical factor. So today we launched the New Dawn Vision project, and I'm grateful to my friends. And then they know how much I admire them, how much I love them. I could not count on thousands of people, but I could count on a few. And then they have been there, loyal friends, Ivorians, and then Maurice Carney is one of them, Adryan, Sia, Jipa, Blackman was here last time with Heather. So these are the people who have been doing what they could, or what they can, with other friends, and then we are winning some victories in the 21st century. So in the next couple of years, there will be a serious conversation about the Brics in Africa. And then we want to be, we are already the pioneers in engaging that conversation. And I thank you, Adryan, that was beautiful. Maurice Carney, that was amazing. Listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I was a little bit surprised by how much you guys know about those topics, and then how you could really nail it like the way they say it in the United States. The same way last time Sia and Sean did a great job, and then Heather, and then, you know, some other friends. So thank you so much, friends. And we will try to connect with Maurice Carney's event. And last week when we organized the Thomas Sankara conference, we had our brother from Canada, Aziz Fall, did a great presentation. Dr. Kalfani, a great presentation. And then my wonderful Dr. Mjiba, she was like outstanding. And so sometimes when I walk in the street and people want to disrespect me, I don't talk about some of the things I do. I say, you know, do you know my friends? Do you know Adryan? Do you know Mjiba? Do you know Maurice Carney? Do you know Sia? And do you know Sean and Heather and some other ones? So I love you, friends. And so beside the Maurice Carney event, next week, that is for the Francophones. Under the umbrella of the New Dawn Vision, we are going to organize a conference just for the youth in French, because we want our group to is about the summit that the French Macron organized with the African youth. So we want our French youngsters, you know, to talk about it. So you will receive an email about that. And then on November the 5th, myself, I will be on the International Municipal Brics Summit. It is a hybrid program. It is organized in Russia. I will be talking from here, and then my perspective will be about the alternative development model for Africa and for the Brics. And so I will be definitely, I'm going to take into account what Adryan and Maurice Carney said today. And so this is what we're going to do. And next year, this is important, because next year on January 15, 2022, around the Patrice Lumumba's Day, we want to organize a conference about Lumumba, and then we want to talk about the restitution of African cultural artifacts. And then, because as you know, Lumumba's tooth has been taken by by a Belgian for more than 50 years. So we will have this. And Maurice Carney can be there, but he proposed another person. And Yao Noel here, who is the president of the network of journalists, who created a Patrice Lumumba's like a Freedom of Press Award. Then he's going to be what we're going to do like next year. So thank you. And then you will be receiving some emails from me. Thank you so much. And then those who want to stay here, there is somebody called Jacques Bertolo. He posted some. I would like you to download it. He put something about Africa's growing and suicidal trade extraversion. SOL June 12, 2021. The link is there. Please click on the link, read it. I will do that myself so that all of us we can learn. Thank you so much. Thanks. So those who want to stay, they can stay. We can talk a bit. But Yao Noel wants to go to church. Jesus is waiting for you. So we talk later on.
All right. Thank you so much, Nyaka. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye,
so much.
everyone. Congrats.
Jacques, thank you. Jacques Bartolo, Jacques, where are you talking from?
Yes, yes.
Bye, everybody.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you.
Let me see your face.
Yes, you don't see my face. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I see. Oh, yes, I see. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Go
Thank
ahead.
you.
I'm listening.
Okay. I am from Toulouse in France.
Oh, okay. And then you speak French. That's great.
Okay. Yes.
So how did you hear about the program? Oh, you are. How did you hear about the program?
Oh, I saw. I received your invitation, so I came. But I have been reformed for 20 years now, and I was teaching agricultural economics, and I have worked 10 years in Africa.
Thank you so much. So we may even have. So please provide your email and your contact information so that
Yes.
we will certainly invite you one day.
Yes, you find my email on the file I sent to you. You will
link.
find my email. Yes.
Thank you so much. I see that. I just click on it. I see that. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you, Jack. And then we will keep in touch. And then thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And then my friends of the Conventions of People's Party.
Hello.
Yes, how are you, Baba? So, Kuba, yes, so can you introduce yourself? We're done technically, but we want to take this the opportunity to network a little bit. Yes.
Thank you. So did you want me to, but anyway, I run a museum in Lansing, all around the African World Museum and Resource Center in Lansing, Michigan. And I was invited to this conference by Rudy. He had mentioned I should, come in. So I'm a Pan-African by 50 some years now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take your information with Baruti, and then so that I can add you to the mailing list. So thank you very much. This is what we've been doing for more than 10 years now. And then, like I said, we've been moving forward. We're trying to do the right thing. That's nice. So when Panga Sabadogo, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think
Pennsylvania.
I think you reached out to me recently, right?
Right, exactly.
Yes. Yeah, I'm glad. So we need to talk. I tried to reach out to you.
No problem. No problem. And thank you for the French part. We're gonna wait for the French part too. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Yeah, last time you were not there for the Sankara conference. You should have been there. That was great.
You're right, exactly.
Thank you very much. Oh yeah,
Thank you very
this
much.
is what we're doing, friends. This is the networking session, so we can be here for 5 more minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Nyaka.
Merci beaucoup. Merci. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for Julia, and thanks to Julia. Thanks to all my friends and everyone who came today. I'll let you go, and then we can talk. Bye.